Hey everybody, my name is Dave Jackson and this is Tales from the Backlog, a video game show where I bring in guests to talk about the games we play. My guests today are friends of the show, both of the hosts of the List Off podcast. I'm lucky I got both of you at the same time, Brian and Ryan. Hey dudes.
Hey, how's it going?
Howdy.
Good to have you guys.
Yeah, we're super excited to be here for sure.
Most definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it's
big
great.
Big fan of the show.
Thanks. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I'm a big fan of the List Off podcast too. So before we get into talking about our games and stuff for today, can you just tell my listeners for a second, what is the List Off podcast all about?
Sure. Yeah, this is the part where I usually say, take it away, Brian.
I'll take it away anytime.
Yeah, go for it, dude. Go for it.
We are a list-based podcast. We mostly focus on video game lists. So like top 10s of PlayStation 4 games or top 10 water levels, music, etc. But yeah, we do that weekly, and sometimes we have guests.
Yeah, we're slowly approaching our 2-year mark in like 5-6 months here. So we thought we'd run out of ideas sooner or later and have to do something outside of video games, but it hasn't happened yet.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and anyone who knows me and knows like my other show, the Top 3 podcast, knows that I'm a list person at heart. So like when I was like, a show that does video game focused lists, hell yeah, I'm in. Just from that, I'm in. And it's a good show. I enjoy. I listen every week, and everyone listening to this show should check out the List Off podcast for sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do the same. I listen to your show every week, man.
Hell yeah.
It's gotten me into some good games. I'll say that much.
Yeah. And today we're going to be talking about another game that I think is pretty good, which is Death's Door. And Death's Door is an isometric action adventure game developed by a 2-person developer team, which is kind of crazy. Just 2 people. They are called Acid Nerve, and this game was published by Devolver Digital in 2021. My elevator pitch for people listening, if you don't know what Death's Door is about, is think of a 2D Zelda game with more difficult combat. Sound right to you guys?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Definitely
more difficult combat.
Yeah,
right. And definitely more of a Zelda game than a Souls-like.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
We'll get into that later. I got some stuff to say about that for sure. So before we get into talking about Death's Door, though, we usually open up the show by talking about other games that we've been playing. So I'll let you guys take it away. Other than Death's Door, anything you played recently that you want to chat about?
Yeah, I'll start with this one, Brian. So I have been erasing a huge blind spot from my gaming history, and I'm playing Mass Effect. I'm currently playing through the first game, which most people say the second game is the high point, so I'm really looking forward to that. But I am enjoying the first game so far. I think I'm more than half the way through it, and should finish it shortly here. I also just had to put down Inscription on my computer to record. It is a game I did not want to put down, and it's a game I will say nothing about because so far so good. I'm really enjoying it. Very dark in tone, kind of deck builder meets escape room so far. So we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah,
you will see where it goes.
One of the previous guests on this show on the Messenger episode talked about playing Inscription, and he was having a good time too. So my PC can't run it, so I'm just hoping like Devolver puts stuff on consoles all the time. Right. So I hope they can do that for Inscription, because I've heard basically nothing but good things about it, and like the art style and the theme and stuff looks super cool.
Yeah. So I was afraid my PC couldn't run it. I have like a GTX 745, which is actually just for business, but it does run the game. So pretty happy with that. But nice. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait anymore for something to possibly be ported, right? So I definitely wanted to get it in before any spoilers hit my ears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are working on console versions. I did hear that they themselves said it through Twitter, so.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. And like I said, it's Devolver, and they usually port basically everything to consoles. So
right.
Good. Man, Mass Effect is you're playing the Legendary Edition, right?
I am. Yeah. It's on Game Pass. So you don't have Game Pass, right, Dave?
I don't have
Oh
an
my
Xbox
gosh.
and I don't have a PC that can run most games, so Game
Yeah.
Pass is just not going to be my thing.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, there's rumors about them making a little dongle that you could add to your TV. So maybe if
Oh,
that happens, you could get in on it. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. I'm kind of like, I wish I could have Game Pass because then I wouldn't have to buy so many games.
Right.
But then I'm already like, I have a backlog of like 75 games and then all the stuff in the PS Now library. I don't need more games, but I would like to have access,
Yeah. So I find that when I first got Game Pass, I had the same issue. I was like, oh my gosh, my backlog grew exponentially. Very anxiety inducing. However, it offers you the freedom of trying a game, and if it's really not your thing within the first hour, you have no qualms about putting it down because you didn't spend money on it. So that's
Right.
nice.
Yeah, that would be nice. And if it's just a thing you plug into your TV instead of paying, $500 for a new Xbox, I think that would be a lot easier to swallow for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's not forget about xCloud, though. Just one last point there. You can run that thing on a Chromebook if you really wanted to.
True.
It's true, yeah. I don't have
Not
a
the
whole
best
lot of
experience,
experience.
but-
Yeah, I've played a few things on the PS Now, like cloud streaming stuff, and it's worked out okay. So I wonder if I ever leave Korea, where I have like the world's greatest internet, if I go back to like Ohio internet, it might not be
Right.
so great. We'll see.
Yeah.
Brian, what you been playing, dude?
So I have been knee deep in Returnal, and I knew I was gonna love that game. I completely missed it last year, but now I have the PS5, the game, and yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm not that far. I've only gotten to the second boss. Can't seem to beat them, but I'm getting closer and closer. So yeah, that game really is technically just a marvel, and
It's
it
incredible.
feels just like this arcade game but in a fully 3D world, and that is just kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I was just dodging bullets the other night and thinking like, man, this is like Space Invaders just in these little pockets of fights basically, and it's phenomenal what they did.
I've talked so much about Return, but it is so seamless and so fast and smooth, and the it really does that. I think really express what the PS5 is capable of better than any other game out there. Especially when you get into like the teleportation animations and stuff.
Yeah.
When you get like molecular, it's incredible.
Yeah. I loved Returnal so much. Like, I put it off for a long time too, even when I had the PS5, because I don't like scary games, and something about the marketing made it seem like it was a horror game. And
Right.
there's some scary parts, but it's definitely not. So I kind of regret putting it off for so long. But yeah, I fucking love that game too. And it's going to be an episode on Tales from the Backlog in the next few months. I have another buddy who like just really loved it too. Yeah, I don't have a lot of negative things to say about it. It's just a good ass game.
Yeah.
My first and only platinum trophy.
Oh man. I thought about it, like, so to get after you beat the game, to get the platinum, is it just like, do you have to max out the weapons and stuff like that? Is there anything weird you have to do?
The most tedious part is getting all the xenoglyph ciphers.
Oh yeah.
In all the levels. It does a good job of tracking how many you have left. You just have to deal with the RNG of room spawns, which can be the tedious part. But I just enjoyed the gameplay so much, it didn't really bother me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the gameplay is just incredible. Like I wouldn't mind. I actually thought about like if I was going to start streaming again, like why not just stream Returnal from time to time, cuz it's just a blast to play through.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, let's see. I'm trying to think, like, it's always weird for me when people ask me, because I'm not sure, like, do I want to talk about games that I'm playing that are going to be on the show later? Or I recently beat the Guardians of the Galaxy game, and I don't think that's going to end up being an episode of the show. But I did love it. Like, really, I was playing Yakuza Like a Dragon, and every day I was like, play Yakuza a little bit less and play Guardians a little bit more. Like, the story and characters and everything really sucked me in.
Yeah, the writing in that game is really something else.
Yeah, so it's Eidos Montreal, and they're the ones who made the newer Deus Ex games, which I really, really like. So as soon as I saw them, I was like, oh, that's okay. It's going to be better than that Avengers game, right? But they really nailed the Guardians, like how they banter with each other and get mad at each other and, rip on each other and everything that makes like them a good group. They really nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually had like a really heartfelt story going on too. It was great.
Yeah, I was talking to Eric from Side Questing podcast, and we were both like, I wasn't expecting that level of emotion from a Marvel game.
Yeah. I mean, I've read some of the comic books, so like it could be heartfelt. Comic books could be heartfelt.
No, they can for sure, and like some of the movies are heartfelt too. But like I kind of feel like with the Avengers game felt like such a cash grab in so many ways. Like I wasn't really expecting them to put energy into writing a really good heartfelt story for what seemed like a kind of throwaway video game at the very beginning.
Oh yeah, especially when it was announced, it definitely exceeded, I think, everybody's expectations.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. Well, what do you guys say we get into Death's Door?
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
All right. So, getting into Death's Door, we are going to go spoiler-free, as always, on the show until we hit the spoiler wall later in the episode. So if you haven't played Death's Door, don't worry. We're not going to spoil what the bosses are like, and we're not going to spoil what happens in the story until after that spoiler wall. So easy listening until then. And we always get started with the show with our histories with the game. So what got us interested in playing Death's Door, and then play time if you remember how long it took you to play. So guest always goes first again, so I will pass it to you guys. What got you into Death's Door?
So for me, I had not known about this game whatsoever. And then it came out and people were really high up on it. And it felt like it was a Game Pass game. I think a lot of people assumed, since it's an Xbox exclusive at the time, that, oh, this is just a Game Pass game. I'll pop it in and see how it is. That was not the case, and it took me a while to get around to buying it and playing it. But just all the buzz that was happening around this game at the time, and people saying it was a Game of the Year contender, and just really talking it up, that had me interested. Just the Zelda aspects, the dungeons. So the moment I had the free time, really, I grabbed that game. It was like
for sure
$5.99 on Epic, so like, yeah, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah. No, it was a similar thing. It seemed like it was just part of the zeitgeist for a while there, where everywhere you turned, people were talking about it, whether it be on YouTube or listening to other podcasts. People really were singing its praises. You had mentioned Eric from the Side Questing podcast. He had guested on our show, and we had a few questions at the end, and he really drilled it home. He said, you got to get Death's Door. It's $20. It's worth every penny. So I think that night I downloaded it and played it and started playing it. It took me probably about 9 hours, I'd say, maybe 7 to 9 hours, somewhere in there, to get through it. It is a lighter game, but yeah, it definitely had enough hype that it piqued my interest. And then to have someone whose opinion I respected say, go ahead and get it, it was all I needed for an excuse to spend the money. I agree, though. It did seem like a game that should be on Game Pass, and I was kind of tough to buy that. Actually spend money on my Xbox felt a little strange, but I did.
Doesn't it feel weird when there's a game that launches on Xbox and it's not on Game Pass from day one? Right. You're like, wait, are they allowed to do that?
Yeah. It did. It felt funny having to like spend money on the Xbox. It's like, no, I don't want to do this. This is wrong.
Yeah. For me, same thing as you guys. Like, as soon as the game came out, it was getting a ton of buzz. People saying like this is a game of the year type game. But what really got me is people were invoking the words Dark Souls in the description of the game. And if anyone listened to my like 2021 in review podcast, I already talked about this at length when talking about Death's Door. But so that Souls-like label is what like drew me in, because I'm a huge Dark Souls, Bloodborne fan, those types of games. And if someone says there's a good one, I will play it at some point. So it was, again, I don't have a PC that can run things, and I don't have an Xbox. So I was like just waiting for that, Switch port, and I bought it day one when it came out on Switch. And for me, it took 9.5 hours. I love it when games keep track of how long it takes you to play. Like I'm just kind of a sicko with stuff like that. So I'm glad it did. So for anyone listening, this is not a very long game. It's shorter than most Zelda games, of which this is a most direct comparison. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the new gen consoles too tracked playtime. So
yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I love seeing that stuff too, man. I always like check other people's playtimes. I do. Yeah. It's the only reason I want to add friends on Switch, because you can't do anything with your friends on Switch really, except see what games they're playing and how long they're playing them. And I like to peek and be like, oh, this person's got 580 hours in Animal Crossing. Good for look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, you should look at my Splatoon playtime. Splatoon 2.
Oh, Splatoon's another one up there where I'm like, I have a couple people on my friends list that are like, 20 hours in Mario, 15 hours in this game, and then 780 hours in Splatoon 2. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a good game.
Yeah. So let's talk about kind of what makes Death's Door special, what makes it stand out. And we're going to start out by talking about the story. And in Death's Door, you play as a cute little crow, which, again, it's another part of like the charm of this game is the characters, and you're playing this cute little crow dude who has a lightsaber or something like that. And your job is to harvest souls for this kind of like, looks like a government office, kind of like the underworld in Hades is presented as a government office. It's kind of the same in this game. So you go out on an assignment and you're supposed to harvest this soul, but somebody steals it from you. And they introduce this thing where like, while you're out on assignment, you are mortal and you can actually die, which I guess these crows are immortal. So that kind of like sets up this story with the game where something's gone wrong in the bureau. You're trying to get after the soul that you have to go get for your job. And that sets you out in the world to go out and like, this is your task throughout the game. So throughout the game, Death's Door gives you like lore notes, kind of. I feel like I'm going to say Dark Souls a lot in this podcast, like I did in the Hollow Knight one too. So drink every time you hear me say Dark Souls. But kind of like Dark Souls, you get little like lore snippets as you go through, and you're alone most of the time, instead of getting, the owl in Zelda talking to you the entire game or something like that. So that's all I'll say about the story. But what do you guys think about the overall plot and like, or I guess like themes, if we're not getting direct plot all the time in this game?
Well, I definitely think the theme's interesting. I mean, and you compared it to Hades, and visually it is very much that bureaucracy, office space. Everybody has to do their desk job to like tally death, right? Yeah. But I did think it did a very good job kind of telling you that when you step out, you are mortal, you age. It immediately instills a fear of death in you that makes it really the whole game is centered around death and the fear of it. So it really drills that home almost immediately. But I think the aesthetic's great. I think the crow is, like you said, adorable, like super cute.
He's just along for the ride. He doesn't really have any interest in what anyone's talking about. He's just doing a crow, like looking around, and
I love the mannerisms. Yeah, whenever people are talking to you, you're like, you almost get the feeling like the crow is just a crow. Like he doesn't really understand
He's
what
not
people are saying. He's
listening.
just looking around like a crow does. And it's
Yep.
great.
That's something it's going to be a consistent like point of praise throughout the show. I think is the animations and the just how like smooth and kind of well thought out. It's a really simple game in a lot of ways, but like it's very, very tight in those kind of ways. And like, yeah, the animations with the crows they're excellent. Yeah.
I do think the storytelling, there's a lot there. If you take your time through the levels, you can, kind of find out what's going on in any particular level or with the boss of that level. So I do think things tend to be a little more vague in the Souls games, where you like what you're reading, right? You like all the lore in a Souls game, but ultimately, I don't know about you, I always got to go to like a YouTube channel and
me too.
Okay, like how does this all fit together? You definitely don't have to do that with this game. It is very much there for you to figure out, and you can figure it out on your own.
Yeah, each kind of like spoke you're going off on in like I'm actually playing Majora's Mask right now, and it's very similar how you go off on these spokes as you go through the story, and each spoke has a contained story in there, all relating to that theme of death. So they are a little bit more direct with some of the storytelling with those individual stories, but the bigger story and like what's actually going on in the world, you get little lore notes throughout, and then you get more direct storytelling toward the end, but we'll go into that in the spoiler section.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the game, you are going to meet some characters, like NPC characters. There's usually one major NPC in each of those spokes, and they're going to kind of be your vessel for like that spoke's individual story. And another thing that I think is cool is the bosses in the game are not just like monsters that just show up when you get to the boss room. They have their own story. Some of them will actually talk to you as you make your way through their dungeon, and you can learn like what's going on with them too, because they are all souls that you need to capture for part of the main plot too. So that should tell you like, I need to capture their soul. This person is should be dead, but they're not, and they all have their own kind of individual reasons for why they're cheating death.
Yeah, so it threw me off the first time I ran into one of those bosses. The first one, when they just kind of appear in a room and start talking to you, and I was like, oh, it's like, is it going down right now?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't feel prepared for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely got a sense of their personality every time that happened. That was a really cool way of doing it. It kind of reminded me of Super Mario RPG, because a lot of the times, like bosses or enemies would have entire conversations with you, and that's another example of, well, Mario just stands there and like he'll maybe shake his head or jump up and down, but
Yeah.
he doesn't have a lot of things to say about it.
Yeah.
So
Mario's always been a man of few words.
that's right.
Mario basically has the intelligence of a crow.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know. If I had to pick one person or one character to get something done, I might pick the crow in this game over Mario. The crow's extremely focused on the task at hand here.
Yeah, I think
That's right.
I mean, it would be hard to say he has more, things at his disposal, because Mario has quite the bat belt.
Oh yeah, he's got hammers and fireballs.
He can kind of do it all. So that would be a tough call. I'm glad you mentioned those characters that you run into in each level too. They were some of the most endearing parts of the game for me. Just each one of them is unique and tells a unique story, and just came off as like some of them came off as like cool guys I just want to like hang out with.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that stands out in Death's Door is you've already heard a little bit of music throughout this episode, and on the Main Quest podcast, big 2021 Game of the Year podcast that he did, Death's Door was the winner for best soundtrack. For me, was my winner for best soundtrack of 2021, and I just think that the music in this game is like, it's incredible, and it's past that kind of test I have where like, do I listen to this outside of actually playing the game? And I actually listen to this soundtrack a lot. It's very good.
Yeah, a lot of harp sounds, I feel like, or like plucking, like doo-doo. I
Mhm.
feel like
Piano.
that was one of the main things that I enjoyed from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very like lo-fi, right? And easy listening. It's good though. It's very, very good music and very somber. It definitely conveys the tones of the game.
Yeah. And so I like when you're going through some of the levels, it's really laid back and you get like these nice piano melodies or like more fantastical instruments, for lack of a better description. I don't know shit about instruments, but uh, the like the boss tracks will like get into these like big like electric guitar based
Right.
songs that are really really cool, and then there are some like huge like fairy tale like just like fairy tale-esque melodies that play in kind of more like uplifting or like more energetic moments as you're exploring, or in cutscenes and stuff like that. And it's just
Very whimsical.
Yeah,
I would
that's
say.
a good word for it. Whimsical. Yeah, let me write that one down for next time.
I think we're very similar in that aspect, Dave. I love music. I love video game soundtracks. I definitely know what I like, but I don't know shit about music. Like how to make it, any instrument, nothing about it. Yeah.
I can just tell you that the soundtrack is just it's excellent, and it's varied, and they do that thing that good video game soundtracks do, where they take that main melody and they put it in different situations with different tones to it to kind of convey like what's going on in that particular scene. I want to shout out the composer. His name is David Fenn. Fellow David. We'll leave the jury out for like who's the better David, but he made a fucking great video game soundtrack, and I make a video
Great
game podcast. I was gonna say it's up to you whether it's fucking great or not, but he made a great soundtrack, and I'm sure there are other people that helped. But yeah, fantastic soundtrack.
Yeah, I would say you make two great podcasts, Dave.
That's right. I want to forget about the top 3 show.
You might have him there.
Yeah. That's true. 2 is greater than 1, and as far as I know, well, maybe he did another game. I'm gonna have to do more research.
He did. He did do another game.
Oh no!
I'm sure he did.
A few more.
I'm
We
in
won't talk
shambles
about
over
that.
here. And we talked a little bit about visuals before, but we talked about animations that are very, very smooth and good. The game is really colorful with different themes for each area, as you might expect. You have your snow area, you have your swamp area, and they're very just like the artistic style is really simple, but at the same time, it looks nice. It's a good game to look at. And then in the Crow's headquarters, it's this black and white, and I love the like contrast. Everything's black and white except that glowing red like lightsaber you're carrying around, and that just always struck me as so cool.
Yeah, wasn't something else at some point? Isn't there a little more color in that environment? I can't remember. It's been a little while, but
There's stuff that happens in there that introduces colors in flashes, but we'll save that for later. But for the most part, when you're walking around, it's just all black and white, everything. The characters, there's some like little green dudes, plant dudes running around in there, but most of the time it's just you and that glowing lightsaber thing.
Yeah, very muted.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely black and white in the office kind of area, but everything else is just so muted when you get into these worlds.
I do like how each world was structured. It is one single environment, but there typically is at least 2 parts to that environment. There's either an outdoor and an indoor part, or like a cave, or it always felt like you were exploring something new because of that slight change.
And it felt like a real space too. I think that perspective really helped give a sense of exactly where you were. And yeah, whenever you did go into a cave, you would come out the other side and like, oh yeah, that was the distance I covered. It all visually makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, and they do a cool thing in those environments that you're going through where like the environments are really big, and there's usually like one path you need to follow to make your way through it, but they do that very good Dark Souls take a drink, everybody. thing where you're unlocking shortcuts to make, like, if you die, it makes your trip back to where you died much shorter, and it always feels good to find those shortcuts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love those moments.
Yeah, those are always good. I feel like I want a zoomed out just picture of the world because it's all like connected, like you said. So it would make just a really big world that you could look at everything at once.
Well, we're talking about kind of going through those levels, so we might as well talk about what it's like to explore those levels because like we kind of made the comparison already to Zelda. So what I meant by that is mostly there's big dungeons, just like Zelda games have. But before you get into the dungeons, you're going through these big environments and you're exploring, you're solving little mini puzzles, you're fighting and stuff like that. And something I think this game does really well is you have a good reason to like poke around everywhere because there's always good stuff to find. You're finding like currency that you can use for your skill tree upgrades and stuff like that. And it's like they have this weird thing with the experience system in the game where you need this currency to upgrade, but you get like shit currency for fighting enemies in the game. You'll get like 1 experience for killing an enemy or like 10 for killing a hard enemy, but you'll get like hundreds as exploration rewards in the game. Mm-hmm. So you're really incentivized to poke around everywhere.
I didn't even pick up on that during my playthrough. That's funny. I just kind of didn't pay much attention to the experience until it was like time to spend it. Mm-hmm. So it's actually really interesting that they did it that way. I think that's cool. Like you said, it incentivizes exploration.
Yeah. Well, like I came at it like, again, I told you I thought this was a Souls-like game. So I was watching how much experience I get for each fight like I would in a Souls game. And I was like, wait, I got 2 experience for that? What's going on here?
Yeah, slap in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the coolest things about the exploration was when you would find those secrets, because sometimes it would be hidden and you would kind of see like a shrine or something, and you would try to make your way over there and the world would just rotate when you got into view, and that was you found the secret kind of visual cue. So that was really cool. Sometimes there would be huge things just like hidden behind like a cliff face that you had no idea was even there.
Yeah, they did some interesting things with that kind of 2.5D, like Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Where you just turn a corner and all of a sudden it's a huge, huge room there.
Right.
Yeah. And other cool things you can find by exploring, you are playing as a crow, so you find these collectibles called shiny objects, literally called shiny objects, and those have little lore notes with them too. Sometimes those things allow you to solve other puzzles. You will sometimes find these shrines that you can kind of interact with, and they work like heart pieces in Zelda for both health and magic. I only found enough to get like 1 health upgrade through the whole game. Like they're really hidden. And I got the 4th one like way late in the game.
Right. Same exact thing happened to me.
Yeah, I think I got a few more than that, but I never made it to the 2nd upgrade. I think doesn't it take like 5 to get the upgrade as well?
It's not a lot.
It's not the same as like heart pieces where you get 4 of them and you get the whole thing.
Yeah, it felt like you had to do a lot more.
Yeah. Well, in any case, they are definitely more rare than heart pieces in a Zelda game, where you're just like, if you're paying attention at all, if you're doing mini games, you'll get plenty of heart pieces in a Zelda game, and this game is not as generous with those. But like we all beat the game, so it's not like we were like struggling, right?
Right.
Yeah. A couple other things you can find when you're exploring around. Sometimes you'll find new weapons, and they have different like attack animations and stuff, so you can kind of customize the way you want your crow to fight. I stuck with the lightsaber sword the whole game because it's badass. I mean,
really? Like you guys never used any of the other weapons?
I tried them out, but it was like, I just didn't, they have different animations. And so this happens to me in other games like this too, where I'm like, I get a new weapon and I try it out and I'm like, I'm used to the old weapon. I don't like how this one feels, so I go back to the old one. That's just kind of how I am.
You know what the
Yeah.
worst feeling was? Completely separate game, but Resident Evil 4, I would do that all the time, where I would like upgrade the gun all the way and then get the new one and be like, but I put everything into this one.
Right.
Yeah, it happens all the time in that game too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ryan, you were experimenting with the weapons?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually found, so I don't know how much I want to give away here about as far as what the weapons are, but they alter your attack speed or power or things like that. I definitely experimented with the weapons, and I found that it probably helped me greatly, maybe just in my head. But there are a few that, one hit, it might be a little slower, but hits like a truck, and another one is going to be a little faster, but it's like you die by 1,000 cuts, right?
Right.
So I really found myself alternating between those two and not really using the standard weapon
Interesting.
for a good chunk of the game.
Okay. Well, there you go. An endorsement for people listening, like experiment with the weapons. Don't be like me and just use the standard one because that's what you're used to all the time. I kind of, in games like this, because this game's not easy, and in any game like this where it's a little bit difficult, if I'm really comfortable with a weapon, I'll just use what I'm comfortable with. And, if it takes me 2 or 3 more hits to kill something, that's cool because I'm comfortable with what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's so you, not to get off topic, but you say the game's not easy. I don't think it's necessarily hard. It's just one of those games like Take a Shot, like a Souls-like game where you have to be okay with dying.
Yeah. You're going to die. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's something that this game does that is, it is difficult, but this is like a thing in its favor where like I was okay with dying while I was learning something, just like in, a Souls game where that's part of the joy of playing those games is, take a shot. Part of the joy of playing those games is dying, but at the same time learning how to do a little bit better next time.
Yeah, and the punishment for death is so much less in this game than it is in any of those games that it's not a hindrance. It's just a slight setback.
Is that our code now? We're just going to say those games from now on?
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, I listen to this, when I listen to your podcast, it tends to be like 6 a.m, so I'm not going to be taking shots, so I'm just going to say those games.
Like, well, you can take a shot of espresso if that's your thing at 6 a.m.
I'll do that.
That might make your heart explode. Maybe reevaluate that strategy. One other thing that I found while exploring, last thing, is you can actually find hidden boss fights through exploring the game, and they're pretty hard. There's a couple enemies that repeat as hidden bosses, and they get harder, like depending on where you find them and stuff like that. But it is always cool to break open a cave and go in there, and now you're fighting a boss, and that was always a cool thing to find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. It's they are hard.
Yeah.
Some of the hardest fights in the game, actually.
Yeah.
From what my experience, anyway. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
No, mine too, for sure. And it's always like when you're in a dungeon and you're fighting the boss, you have a quick way to get back to that boss if you die, But in those hidden fights, it might be just in a cave in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a level that's far away from one of your spawn points, and you have to run back there if you want to fight it again.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Very familiar with that.
Yeah. And the last thing to talk about with exploring is, like a Zelda game and not unlike a Metroidvania, you're going to pick up items that, there's literally a hook shot in this game, which is why I'm saying Zelda. So just like in a Zelda game, you have come across points like before that where you're like, I need a hook shot for this. I got to come back later. And Death's Door does that same thing with the few upgrades that you get. You get you get bombs, and you get your hook shot. You get like a fire spell, and all of these will unlock new secrets for you to find and upgrades and stuff like that if you take the time to go back through those levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess it might be a little late to say the crow doesn't fly. so you will need a hook shot.
Yeah,
It's got that heavy weapon. You can't
exactly.
fly anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you guys play Zelda games or Metroidvanias or something, is that something you like doing, going back through those old levels to kind of comb for all those upgrades you missed before?
I feel like I did that more when I was younger. I would get the upgrade and then go back all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, I just get it and then go to the next place to like mainline the story. And then maybe I'll go back.
Yeah. Yeah, this is why we get along so well, Brian, because I'm kind of the same way. When I was a kid and you had the one game that you just pour hours into and search every corner of, I would definitely do it more. If the game is good enough, I will do that sort of thing. But it really depends on how far back I have to go. You know, if there's something within the area I'm in, sure, cool, I'll do it. But if I have to go like all the way back to the beginning, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. For me, it kind of depends on, like, especially in a Metroidvania where you got to go through a whole bunch of rooms and stuff, it kind of depends on how good it feels to play. You know, am I having fun just like jumping and gliding around? If so, I'm much more likely to do it. In Death's Door, it's kind of in the middle. I went back through the big hub level for upgrades, but I didn't go back through all of the spokes looking for upgrades. That's probably why I didn't find so many of those shrines. Maybe that's on me.
Yeah, well, I did the same, so
Yeah.
probably why I didn't find to be there.
Yeah, and well, a little tease for what's coming up after the music break is part of the reason that I didn't go back through all these levels is the combat. So we're going to take a little music break. When we come back, we'll talk about the combat, which is a big part of what you're doing in these levels. All right, so talking about the combat in Death's Door, this is an isometric action game. We talked about Hades before. This is the same kind of thing. And before I kind of talk about my issues with the combat, because I don't love it, I will say that this is extremely smooth and there's like no jank at all. It's really polished as far as combat goes. I never really had like hitbox issues or enemies glitching or anything like that. It's extremely smooth.
Mm. So you want
That was
us
my
to start?
experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very smooth, very responsive. It felt kind of standard. It felt like you never got better at fighting as the game went on.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like the only thing it did that was different from maybe some of the older Zelda games is it added a roll.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like a good roll. I think the roll gives you iframes.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm pretty sure it does, because you have to roll through like wave attacks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
I don't think Zelda rolls give you iframes. They're just kind of there.
Right.
So yeah, we talked about the weapons. So you have your main weapon that you equip. There are 5 total in the game, and you find them through mostly exploring. You also have a bow and arrow, which you can shoot a limited number of arrows, and then you recharge it by hitting stuff in the environment, by hitting enemies, or anytime you need the bow and arrow for a puzzle, they'll put pots and stuff that you can smash to refill your ammo, like a hyperlight drifter type thing. You also get a fire spell, a bomb, a hook shot, a charged attack, and then, like we said, a dodge. And those are your combat abilities throughout the game. You can upgrade your bow and your spells and your hook shot by fighting this optional boss that you can find. And it's actually a really fun fight. I enjoyed that, but I don't know how good an upgraded hook shot actually is, you know?
Right. Go farther.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite out of these weapons that you found yourself using most, like inside or outside of combat?
I basically always kept the fire spell equipped, and then just the lightsaber. But in combat is really like frantic in most of the things here, and so I had my bow equipped for bosses to do like just chip damage whenever I had a nice shot. But during like the regular combat, it was really just melee fighting, unless there was some enemy I couldn't reach.
For me, it was the bow.
Oh yeah,
the bow.
Yeah, the bow.
Yeah, it was the one I upgraded, so it didn't take long. It didn't have a long delay to fire, so I think that might have helped. And I just I would go ham with that bow.
Yeah.
I feel like I used the bomb spell a decent amount. It was a good way to kick things off. But yeah, definitely the bow and arrow too.
Oh, it's interesting. We all kind of use different things too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for such a limited tool set, it's not like you're building, your specific type of character that you want to build. It is cool that all of us found different things we liked using. So most of the combat is there are enemies like in the levels. They're just kind of walking around to fight. But the way the game has made combat challenges is with these kind of like horde wave encounters. And this is in your important rooms. You always have to fight them as you're making your way through the level to get into the dungeon. When you find your big dungeon upgrade, like hookshot, for example, you have to do a big wave-based thing. And I don't like these at all. I don't like how this is how the game has made combat encounters, which is just wave and then wave and then wave. Like there's I don't feel like there's any of these where they have creatively like, okay, this enemy here to create a challenge. It's like, you're going to fight this small guy, and then you're going to fight this big guy, and then you're going to fight the small guy and the big guy. And that's how a lot of those things go. And by the end of it, I was like, oh God, another fucking wave combat. I wasn't a fan.
Right. No, I get it. It is that like, it just ramps up. And there's one that I had specifically that I had a really hard time with later in the game, where it was like, oh, here's a small guy and a big guy. Now here's two big guys. Now here's three big guys.
Yeah.
Now here's four. And it's like, stop.
Exactly.
Like, where's the end to this?
Yeah.
So I could see your gripes with it, but I had enough fun with them that I don't know if I would necessarily classify it as a negative, but I could definitely see how it would get annoying.
Yeah. Well, like, so I don't know. In the beginning of the game, I thought like, oh, okay, this is cool. So I have to pass this challenge. And Zelda does this too, where you'll go in a room and a bunch of enemies come out and you have to kill all the enemies to unlock the door. And so this game does that too in the dungeons and stuff. But it's just any time they want to have a combat challenge, it's a wave encounter every single time. And I like by like the halfway point in the game, I would see like those pink doors opening. I'm like, oh, God damn it. Not again.
Yeah.
But like the saving grace is that the combat's really smooth, and it's, it would suck if like the combat was janky and the hitboxes were bad, but it's not like that. So like, if you like fighting in this game, then you may enjoy these wave-based things more than I did.
I'm generally a wave fan. I like horde mode and whatever it's called in Halo. But yeah, I kind of echo the same things you guys are talking about. When it was more challenging, when there were more enemies in those later levels, I tended to enjoy it more just because I was having to think more about the combat, which I did really like. So when it was really chuff, that was the time that it really shined for me.
Yeah, I feel like I can't gripe about this too much though, because there is another wave-based type of battle that I really enjoyed. But I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just got tired of it. And the other thing that like, I actually think, okay, Brian, you brought up a good point. I don't like waves in any game, really. If it's like playing like a, a co-op shooter or something like that, and that's how it is, it's like, wave after wave after wave. I don't want to play that kind of game. So maybe I'm like inherently against that kind of thing. But the thing that I think like kills this for me is the healing system in Death's Door, which the healing system I think is a bad design decision. I don't like this at all. So you can't heal in combat at all, or during exploration. And like in a Zelda game, you can't heal like by yourself, but you find hearts everywhere. Even in boss arenas, you find hearts that will heal you. So in this game, you can't heal at all. And you can only heal at these like special pots around the levels, and you have to find a seed to plant in the pot. And then once you plant it, it will always have a seed in it, so you can return to it and heal after a certain number of time. So I get they're trying to set up these healing stations throughout the levels. And I think, like I talked about this in the Death's Gambit and the Dark Souls episode, I think what they're doing is they're saying, like, you have 4 hits you can take during this combat challenge. You can make 4 mistakes, but some of those wave things are really long, and the enemies, they can get overwhelming. There can be a lot of enemies on the screen at the same time. And I just don't like this. Like, if you want me to only be able to take a certain number of hits, let me heal a certain number of times. Give me Estus Flask, basically. That's what I'm saying. Or I don't know. It's kind of demoralizing.
Don't make it so hard. Don't make it so hard to find, like, the heart pieces.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and again, I beat the game. This wasn't something that made me want to like stop playing, but when those wave things come up, if you take a hit early on in the encounter, it kind of like psychs you out a little bit, because you're like, oh, the hardest stuff hasn't even come, and I can only get hit 2 more times. And I just don't like this at all.
I kind of viewed it as like a typewriter Resident Evil system, where it was just like, all right, here's the point that I'm at, and then I'm gonna either get to the next save point or I'm not, and I'll have to start over. So I think that perspective helped me. I totally get where you're coming from with that, where, yeah, you have no agency over when you can kind of get a breather at any one point.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that in some levels, those pots are spaced out really well. In others, they're like every turn there was one level in particular where it seemed like you'd do like a loop, like go to the next corner and there'd be another pot there. And it was like, I really don't need this to be here. Like, I just had one. And then there were other times where, like, there wouldn't be a pot anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe that would work, but I agree. It is a hindrance not being able to heal mid-battle. Definitely hurts you. Yeah.
Like, give me 1 heart equivalent of healing after I beat one of the waves. Or, like, if it's like the super long wave fight, like, maybe have one enemy drop something that will heal me one thing, Just not having any healing at all during these like long combat things was just a bummer. For me, it was like a major strike for like how fun this game actually was, because you're doing a lot of fighting.
Yeah, it definitely makes those moments a little bit more tense too when you're down to your last little, gem of health, right? And it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Puts a lot more pressure on you.
Yeah. But one thing that I thought was really, really good is the boss fights. And this is really surprising for me to say that I don't really like the regular combat in the game, but I love the boss fights. That's like the opposite of how a lot of games end up being, I think. These boss fights, I think, are all really good. They're hard, especially the optional ones are hard, but they really tap into that. Like, you can learn this boss's moveset, and then you can just skill your way through it. They're really skill based. I think they're really good.
Yeah,
I loved them. This was one of the highest points for me was figuring out the bosses. There was one that I had a really difficult time, but then you learn it and understand, okay, these are all my mistakes. It's fair, but I just need to learn it and get through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say aside from the music, this, like Brian said, was the other high point of the game for me. The, rabble that you find throughout the level, I felt the same as you, Dave. I was like, man, I just want to get through this. This is just in my way. And anytime that I died and had to go back and make it through it again, it was like, really? Like these guys again?
Yeah.
So they maybe could have done a little more with the average enemy, but they did a superb job with the bosses.
Yeah, totally agree. And again, this is a really small developer, so they have limited resources and time that they can put into everything in the game. And it's pretty clear to me that they spent a lot of time making the game very smooth throughout. Everything is smooth and responsive. And then they made put a lot of effort into making these boss fights really, really good. So like if you've played a Zelda game, just, there's Zelda type boss fights. They all have a kind of puzzly gimmick to how to beat them. It's not like, this enemy has a glowing eye, shoot the eye 3 times. Right. It's not like, it's a bit more advanced than that. But they all have a gimmick. There's one that's in the trailer, so I don't really feel bad talking about it. The first boss you fight is this, big centipede thing that's like smashing its arms down, and so you just have to avoid the arms and just go whack the middle of it. And then the one after that, which is also in the trailer, is the she's called the Urn Witch or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so she'll like a Zelda boss actually does, she'll hop inside of the urn and jump around, and you got to use your ability that you got in the level. So big inspiration from Zelda stuff. Some of the boss fights were really long. Like they take a lot of hits, but they're pretty fun. And it's one of those things where once you figure out what the boss is doing, you're not going to like get surprised by anything. You just have to keep executing.
Yeah. So if we're able to talk about the Witch of Urns, right? We're able to discuss a little bit of that.
She's in the trailer, so I don't feel bad about that.
So I think this highlights what this game does really well. As you go throughout that level, you encounter puzzles, right, that you have to solve, and they use vases, right? And a certain color of vase or vase, if you're pretentious.
I was going to say,
might
are you
explode.
trying to say vase?
Oh, see? Look at Brian's pretentious. I knew it, man. I knew it. Man, so vase, so a certain color, when you hit it, it will explode, right? This is when you're going throughout the level. Another, they all have these different qualities to it. So when you go in to get to this boss, not to touch a certain color of vase that she's like throwing your way, because it explodes from that prior experience. And I thought that, that's really good design there. It gives you an immediate idea of how to defeat the boss, and it's not obtuse like, oh, I got to figure this out on the fly, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's one of those highlights of the boss fights for me, is they all kind of telegraph what needs to be done even prior to getting to the boss itself.
Yeah. But you have and like Zelda bosses will kind of teach you that too. As you go through the dungeons, you're learning how to use that item, and then you have to use that item against the boss you're fighting. And it's the same in Death's Door. And
but you don't have like a baboon slapping its bare butt like hit me here, right? It's
that is the only kind of thing I take direction from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that happened in a Zelda game.
Yeah.
Guys. Yeah. Twilight Princess.
Like, sidebar, the NPCs and stuff like that in Zelda are all just fucking bonkers in every game. Like they put all their weirdest ideas and all their weirdest faces that they can draw on the NPCs in Zelda. So
right. Beetle.
Yeah. I'm playing Majora's Mask at this moment. I get to talk to Tingle once every 15 minutes. Yeah. So yeah, these boss fights are really, really fun. They're kind of like they're taking that like Zelda puzzly aspect of it, like we talked about, but just adding a bit more like skill-based combat, because you have a bit more, you have that nice dodge roll and stuff like that, so they can make it a little bit more action-packed than a Zelda boss might be. So yeah, those are good.
Hulu Limpa. I'm sorry.
He's a
tingle tuner is going off.
Yeah. He's a 35-year-old Kokiri.
Dresses up. Yeah.
Never gotten his own fairy, and he doesn't remember me, even though I talked to him 10 minutes ago.
He's
So
the best.
yeah. All right. So Ryan, you've played the Souls games, right?
I have. I love Souls games.
Have you, Brian?
I've played Bloodborne, and if things go Ryan's way, I'll be playing through Dark Souls.
That's true. Yeah.
But nothing yet.
By the time this episode comes out, people will know if things went Ryan's way or not. So, like I said at the beginning, this game got a bunch of people like saying that, hey, it's like a Zelda and Souls game together, and that was always the descriptor. That was what made me interested in playing this game. So I want to ask you guys before I say my thing, do you guys think that that's an accurate descriptor for this game?
I'll let Brian talk first.
Not in the least. No. Not really. I mean, the combat is challenging, but from my Bloodborne little time I have played of that is way more challenging. You really have to learn the moves of the enemies, and yeah, for Death's Door, if I ran into an issue, I kind of like said, okay, well, I guess they do that, and then moved past it, usually without much trouble. So yeah, I don't think that's an accurate descriptor. The Zelda thing, totally, but not Dark Souls.
Yeah, I think this could be the poster child of journalists getting ahead of themselves when they say something is like a Souls game. Because it gets thrown around a lot, and this has almost no qualities of a Souls game aside from what you had said earlier about you have those aha moments when you unlock a door and you're like, oh, this is a shortcut now. But that's something that Metroidvanias and Zelda games do as well. So I definitely think this is way more of a Zelda game. And I had heard comparisons to Souls-likes as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was a little disappointed by that. Yeah.
I promise I wasn't making that up. It was like one of the key games that people compared this to. And yeah, I think Ryan, you're right. Like this was like the game that kind of gave me this idea that like it keeps popping up every now and then now that like since Dark Souls came out, people don't know how to describe how a game is difficult without saying that it's like Dark Souls. And this is just a hard game, but it doesn't have difficulty the same way it does. So like I just want, like, I keep bringing this up because I want people who are listening, I don't want you to listen to this show and come out thinking like, yes, it is like a Dark Souls game, like all the people say it is. Like, I promise you it's not. It's just a hard Zelda game. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
It definitely does it a disservice to be called a Souls-like.
Yeah, it does a disservice to both games. Like it shows that people don't understand what Dark Souls do with their difficulty, and it also takes away from what Death's Door is doing the way that they make difficulty too. So like it's just, yeah, can we just go back to saying games are challenging? We don't have to say everything is like Dark Souls.
Yeah. I wonder if that just gets the clicks, you throw that name out there.
I'm sure. Yeah. Depressing to think about.
Same with the Breath of the Wild, like. So.
Oh yeah. The the big open world has the big open world that's not full of towns and stuff like that is just automatically a Breath of the Wild clone now.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, if it doesn't have like hyper realistic graphics and it's an open world, it's a Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, it's either a Grand Theft Auto open world or it's a Breath of the Wild open world. And that's it.
Yep, no in between.
Yeah, the two genders. So
yeah,
yeah. So anything else about the game itself before we get into final thoughts and stuff like that, and then spoiler time?
Nothing in particular. Yeah.
Right on. I mean, it's a short game. It's a fairly simple game, and you're basically repeating this loop of like explore a level, find out what's going on in this spoke, go into the dungeon, get your key item, fight the boss, go to the next one, basically. And like we said, it's not a super long game, so.
I actually have one thing. We talked about exploration. I don't think we ever said it outright. If you are the type of game player who gets overwhelmed by like finding your way in games, you don't have to do that here.
Right.
You basically are told where to go next throughout the whole experience. You just have to explore that level to get through it, and it's never difficult to explore or figure out where to go or anything like that.
Yeah.
I actually did have a little bit of an issue in a couple of the times. Sometimes it was because of the map. So there's no map that I'm talking about, but like the game space that you're on, especially in that first area, there's sometimes some cliffs that I didn't know, like, am I this far down or am I all the way up at the top? Like, I kind of got lost in some of those samey looking areas. And then there was another point later on where I was just going to all the explored places and could not find my way around. So I think I had a little harder of a time in some of those circumstances, but overall, I still got through in about the same amount of hours that you guys said.
Yeah, there's smaller spaces, I guess is a good way that I should have put it maybe, is that once you're in a level, it's not huge. It's not overwhelming. It's not like a Breath of the Wild.
Right.
You have a huge expanse to explore.
And you'll get in these like levels leading up to the dungeons where like there's one entrance into it and then there's one exit out of it. So like you're not going to be like trying to figure out like, do I go in like any of these 5 exits to this level, you know? So they do kind of keep you on the path, especially your first time through it, because you haven't gotten the hook shot yet, and there's only really one path you can go until you get the hook shot. And so they do a good job of guiding you through there, I think. There was a point later where it's I think it was in the last spoke where things got a little mazy. And I think there was just like a staircase or like a path that I just missed for a while, and I was just kind of wandering around, but that didn't last too long. Yeah. All right. So music break here. When we come back, we will give our kind of final thoughts in summary about Death's Door and a little bit of housekeeping. For final thoughts for Death's Door. Do we recommend and stuff like that? So I will turn it over to the guest as always. What do you want listeners to know about Death's Door?
So I'll go first. I was really hot on this game right after I beat it, and I really enjoyed my time with it and was thinking about it, and that was always a sign that the game was really good. And I'll talk a little bit more once we hit that spoiler wall about, after the story. But at this point, so far removed, I definitely have cooled on it. It probably was a little higher on my game of the year list than I had imagined. But yeah, It's a great game. I think it's beautifully done. I think it's very charming. That's one of its biggest strengths. So I would say I recommend it. There is definitely a price that you have to kind of determine yourself if it is worth it. I got it for a great price of $5.99. So like for that, for like the price of a rental, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I like the amount of time that it hangs around. Doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a great kind of pick up, do it in 3 or 4 sessions at the absolute most. So yeah, it has a lot of those things going for it. And if they made a sequel, I'd probably play it, you know, especially if they improved upon the things that we kind of said weren't the greatest. So yeah, I would say recommended at a lower price unless you really want to, you know, support these developers. Throw $20. Like that's not bad at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just to recap, where do you remember where it was on your Game of the Year list?
It was high. It was like
3.
I feel like
2?
it was in the top 5.
Yeah, I do too.
I want to say
too.
like 3.
I'm not gonna rub that in, Brian.
Well,
no,
see, I've played more games.
No, I'm glad.
And I've played other games longer that I just didn't have. And
it takes a big man to admit they were wrong.
It's
a big man to admit they were wrong.
At this point, 1 month away, like I could absolutely make a completely different list at this point.
Yeah. So I will say, I did not have it on my Game of the Year list, and I was kind of given a little bit of crap for that. So this is just my comeuppance, I guess, on your show.
I would still include it on my
I actually
list.
I actually want to say that the one change I would make is I probably would wipe. So I know we're talking about our show. I'm so sorry, Dave.
It's all right.
But I would wipe.
This is the first airing of grievances on the show. I'm happy to have it.
I would wipe The Artful Escape from my list and put this on it in its place.
I think that's a good switch.
I would
having not
that.
played The Artful Escape.
If I could go back and redo it, I'd do that. Because I will say, this is a very competently made game. The fact that it's made by 2 people is awesome. They made a game prior to this called Titan's Souls. And this, you know...
a Dark Souls, like...
Right, because it has souls in the name, exactly.
Right.
But apparently this is a pseudo sequel to it, perhaps. I don't know. I read that somewhere, so don't hold me to that. But look, I think this is a video game, and if you enjoy video games, you will enjoy this game. I just don't think it shines in any aspect outside of the music, like beyond what we've seen before, right? And that's doing this game a disservice. I had a blast playing it. I played it without picking up anything else in the meantime. It's a quick game. I spent $20 on it, not the $5.99 that Brian spent. And I would say, yeah, I definitely recommend this game at that price point. If it was $40, no, like don't buy it at $40. But at $20, you will enjoy this game, and maybe you'll enjoy it a lot more than I did, enough to do the end game stuff and get through it, because there is end game stuff there, and that's cool that there is, that they give you just a little more to do. But it is very well made, and there's a lot there to like. So yeah, wholeheartedly, I would recommend playing this game.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Ryan. I do think this is a game that, like, I would recommend that people play, but I want people to like temper their expectations, especially if you've heard that Dark Souls comparison. I think if you like 2D Zelda games, like if you really like A Link to the Past and you really like A Link Between Worlds, which is my personal favorite 2D Zelda game, then I think there's a lot to like here in Death's Door. I just really got like, you know, that comparison really put an idea in my head, and it just I was set up for disappointment right from the very beginning, because people don't know how to describe something that's hard now. You can just say the word difficult, that's fine. So yeah, I'm actually the opposite of you, Brian. When I finished this game, I was like really kind of lukewarm on it, and as we've talked about it, and I'm kind of like looking at it holistically, I actually like it more than I did right after I finished it. I do think this is a good game, and it's really well made. The music we've talked about is excellent. The boss fights are excellent. And when we're putting up these like pluses and minuses, you know, I don't like the wave combat much, and I hate the healing system in it. But overall, I still think this is a pretty good game. It's just not a game of the year type game for me. But it's a solid game, as we said. So again, especially if you really like those 2D Zelda games, there's going to be something here that you'll like for sure. And there's a lot that this game does better than those 2D Zelda games. Like, I think the boss fights in this are excellent. So yeah, that is final thoughts about Death's Door. A little bit of housekeeping before we head into Spoiler Town. So if you're going to tap out now because you want to save yourself from spoilers, I want to say thank you for listening. And if you would like to support Tales from the Backlog, the best thing to do is to leave ratings and reviews and tell people about the show. And I know that people will block you on social media if you recommend podcasts. I know how it goes, but it's worth it, I say. So subscribing and stuff like that. You guys know all the podcast stuff. Support the show in any way that you can. I really appreciate it. I also do a show that has been mentioned a few times called A Top 3 Podcast, which is another list-based show, but we only do top 3s. We're not as good as the List Off podcast, which does top 10s, which is just insane to me to think of 10 things. I can only think of 4 on my show. So check out A Top 3 Podcast if you like. Actually, I was going to say if you like your lists to be more concise, but our episodes are longer than List Off episodes. So yeah, check out A Top 3 Podcast. And then once again, List Off Podcast, which is part of my weekly listening. And it's just been great having you guys on the show before we go into Spoiler Town. So List Off Podcast, everyone check that out.
And thanks so much for having us. Seriously, I do listen to you every week, man. And I will just name some games here that you got me into. Hollow Knight, Florence, Mortal Shell via social media.
Right.
Yeah, so you've definitely gotten me into some good games that I've enjoyed. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really been nice. I listened to a couple episodes before coming on, and yeah, I really like the deep dives into things, and yeah, always have good guests. And man, it must be hard getting guests lined up, because I know that I stress out every time we have like stuff not lined up. So
yeah,
kudos there.
My secret is that I plan guests and then I record things like months ahead of when they release. So that's my secret for not dying of anxiety, is giving myself an insane buffer of time. So yeah,
we give ourselves a day.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and Top 3 Podcast, you guys are always welcome to come on that show.
Cool.
If you want to experience what a top 3 is like, as opposed to a top 10.
Be nice.
I don't know if you can narrow it down that much.
That's the hard part, is narrowing it down. I feel like we give ourselves a long stretch to go. So
yeah.
Sometimes we have a hard time narrowing it down to 10,
yes,
depending on the subject matter. So
yeah, for sure. All right, so we are going to take another music break. When we come back, it's spoiler time for Death's Door. Okay, back with Brian and Ryan talking about Death's Door spoilers. So I want to start out by talking about the little crows that you find as you're going through the levels. I didn't say this in the non-spoiler part because I think this is a cool thing to discover, and I wanted to save it for now. So as you're going through the levels, the dungeons, you'll find like 3 usually. Is it 3 or 4 or something like that?
3. Yeah,
I think it's 3.
Yeah, dead crows that were obviously out on assignment, and this is something that they give to you in these like lore notes, and you have to connect together what happened that like stranded these crows out here, and they ended up dying. Did you guys pick up on that? Because I did not.
So
I mean,
yeah.
For me, it was kind of just flavor. I didn't really do any sort of connection. I mean, I guess a little bit, you really had to put it together yourself, kind of what happened if you want to know, like, okay, yeah, this is why these people are here. But I kind of was like, all right, I got the 3, and now I can go through the door.
So I kind of read up, like, so if you go back to the main hub, right? Throughout the game, you go back to the main hub, and the one that's all muted grays and
The
whites.
office, yeah.
Right, the office. And when you get there, you find these little notes, and it's usually crows that seem suspicious of something, right?
Yeah.
Like you find these little behind locked doors, typically to parts of that office that are locked away and you're restricted access to. But when you leave a level, you go into that part of the office. So my headcanon was that those crows were kind of becoming suspicious of a corruption within the bureaucracy. And they even say they were sent on assignment and the door closed, so they couldn't get back to like the hub where they don't age and are immortal. A few of them say that. So I think as soon as they became suspicious, I mean, this is behind the spoiler wall, so I can go hammer, right? So as soon as they became suspicious of the Lord of Doors, he sent them on assignment only to lock them away, knowing that they would eventually die there. So it's kind of like really poignant to me. Like these guys were just, working and got sent on assignment thinking they were going to do their job and were left there to die. So I thought that was interesting. And I think that's something that you kind of have to infer just because you do find those notes in the office and they would seem completely unrelated to the crows left behind. I just kind of thought that might be why.
Yeah, it seemed to me like in my head there were two possibilities. So like one is like you said, what happened here is like directly connected to the main story. The other one that I thought was like there's a separate, I think they even say like the event or like some event happened. I don't know if they use the word event, but like something happened that like shut all the doors at the same time. So I wasn't sure if that was connected to the Lord of Doors or if there was something else going on. Like I've said in the other episodes of this show, like in the Hollow Knight Death Gambit episode, I'm not great at doing the work to put these kind of things together by myself. I'm a check the wiki for the story. I'll watch the VaatiVidya, story of Dark Souls video because I can't figure it out by myself. Or like, I don't know. I want to give myself
I said it earlier because I'm like,
I want to give myself some credit, but like intelligence wise, but I don't want to do the work to read all the stuff and put the pieces together. So yeah, I was just curious if you guys picked up on that. And
so that's great though for like movies where there's twists because you're like, what? Oh yeah. I wasn't putting any of that together.
I am not looking ahead. I am not reading between the lines. I'm just vibing.
No, I think that's how you put it actually in the Hollow Knight episode, and I completely agree. I am on the same wavelength as your vibe.
Yeah,
Ryan, I think you get way more than I do in a lot of these movies and shows we've discussed. Wow. Oh yeah.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I always feel like I'm missing the point.
Well, I kind of have that thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to do a podcast episode about Dark Souls or about Bloodborne. And then I get my guest on. I'm like, okay, so what's going on in the story?
Yeah, that happened to me.
I've kind of reconciled, like, it's my job to talk about my experience with the game. It's not my job to teach everyone what the story is. So there's other YouTube channels. People make their entire careers telling the story of these games. So we'll let them do it. They're good at it. So I'm sure there's some great Death's Door story videos, like lore videos on YouTube. I'll look for some. Maybe I'll link it in the episode description. So
cool.
There's also a very good no-clip documentary about the making of Death's Door. If you guys haven't checked that out, if you like making of game documentaries, no-clip is a great channel, and they did a nice like maybe 45-minute making of Death's Door documentary, and it's really good.
That's cool. Yeah, I will check that out. I do like their documentaries.
It's amazing how many times I'm like, okay, this game was good, and then there's a no-clip documentary already on it.
Yeah, and I remember seeing that, but I hadn't played Death's Door yet, so it sat on my like watch later list on YouTube for months until I finally played the game. So, okay, so that like kind of story with the crows, we have decided is connected to the Lord of Doors. I actually like that kind of commentary a little bit about like, some offices will do this too. Like someone complains or someone like figures out something and they cut them loose as soon as they figure it out.
Right.
But I always felt really like touched when I found those dead crows. Is just a very short little burst of just sad little story, because their dialogue is pretty good, even though it's only a few sentences each time.
Yeah. I mean, it fits within the theme of like letting go, right? And yeah, they seem almost relieved, but it is kind of sad. Like, man, you were cheated out of your life. Like, that sucks, you know? Yeah.
There was definitely like an honor to it as well. Like, they kind of died and knew, like, all right, well, this is the way it was.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Speaking of that theme of letting go, that's kind of the theme of all three of those spokes that you go on, with the Urn Witch, with the Frog King, and then the Beast at the top of the mountain, and not wanting to let go for different reasons and different ways that they kind of avoid death or cheat death. So I want to ask you guys, was there any of those three that really stood out to you?
We actually discussed this earlier, not earlier than, well, on a prior episode of our show, but for me, it was the Frog King. He's maybe the least deep character. There's not a lot there, but man, he was just fun. The way he like
the Yeti, wasn't that like a pretty not deep character?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's true too. But I like how the Frog King kept popping in. And like checking on your progress and being like, "You sure you want to do this, buddy? Like, I don't know if you want to keep going." You know, he was cool, man. Just seeing like the big frog head pop through a window and
it's always very startling when that happened. Sometimes it was like through a waterfall, I think.
Right.
Just like we're just trying to get by.
The Frog King's thing, like, I agree. He's not the deepest character. His whole reason for cheating death is that he just wants to rule over this area. And kind of hard to rule over an area if you're dead, so I get his motivation there. Not very deep, but cool character. And the boss fight was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that boss fight. I love how he's wearing armor that's too small for him, and he has he's barely holding on with these straps, and you have to shoot the straps off of his back or break them, a la a Zelda fight. I thought that fight was pretty easy. I think I first tried it, but it was a fun fight.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's ruled for too long and got comfortable. I guess it's safe to say.
Yeah, for sure. Once you become king, you get out of the weight room a little bit.
Exactly. Like, I don't have to try so hard anymore. Look at what is it? Game of Thrones, Robert Baratheon, right? Like, hey, it happens to everybody. But the cool thing I thought with that level is if you talk to some of the villagers, they'll eventually start talking about how he was a good ruler at one time. So once again, like inferring, I kind of got that he felt like he was the best to protect the people he ruled over. And somewhere along the line, he lost sight of that and it became more about ruling forever. Yeah.
That was a cool one. I think the only one of these three that evoked some kind of like sadness or like deep story at all was the one with the witch, the Urn Witch and Pothead, about how she's trying to basically cheat death for herself and her family, but inadvertently cursed them to have or cursed the one to have a pot for a head, as his name would suggest. And that was cool too, because she pops up throughout the dungeon, kind of like, I can't remember exactly what she's talking about, but she's popping up and talking to you throughout the dungeon. And this was the first one, and I wasn't like exactly sure what to do, so I would attack her as soon as she popped up. Right. And I don't know if you have to attack her to get her to go away, but as soon as she was talking, I was very much in like, oh, this is the boss, you got to die, so fireball.
Right. Right. Yeah, she does just kind of watch you if you leave her there too. It's kind of eerie. Right.
Yeah, we already talked about that fight, but I think the story there is the only one of these three stories that I think had the kind of emotion that a game that's like talking about the theme of death and letting go could get into.
I mean, yeah, she tried to save the one she loved, and ended up turning his head into a pot of soup. But it is delicious soup.
Yep.
So, and he offers you some of it, which I thought was great.
Oh,
Yeah.
You should have gotten a skill point or something like that for drinking his head soup.
Right? You should have. I agree.
I don't even remember the Beast storyline.
I don't either.
Like an angry Yeti.
No, wasn't there somebody who like lost their love, and then you find out like there was a guy you meet down in the village who was talking about the love of my life retreated up the mountain.
That's
blah, blah,
right.
blah.
Yeah.
And then you find out the love of his life was like Betsy or Betty,
That's right.
the huge Yeti, right? Betty
Yeah.
the Yeti, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't really having to do with her; it was somebody else. But
Right.
yeah,
But that was another kind of side character that I liked, was the squid that like took over that dead body and was just like animating it in the cafe area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was hilarious.
that was so off-putting. It was so weird.
Yeah.
For this game, it was like, wait, hold on. I feel like there's some big, deeper thing going on here. Like, how did this happen?
Right.
The Beast was for me, it was the hardest boss of
Definitely.
the three. It definitely took me the most tries with that spinning roll attack, and like, you know, it's whenever you play a game, if you've played any Zelda game or anything like that, you know, like, oh, this enemy rushes at me, like curls up in a ball, I need to make it run into the wall, you know, but it comes at you really fast, and it took me a while to get the timing down to dodge that attack. But once I did, it was a really fun fight.
Yeah, I got through that one by the skin of my teeth. That was a tough one for sure.
Yeah, these were all fun fights. I'm just so happy I made it beyond the spoiler wall without spoiling the game.
Yeah.
I was sweating it for a while there. I was like, I can't say certain things. Like, hold it in. Yeah.
Even if you did, that's the magic of audio editing. So no worries. The other thing I just wrote down, like the mountain was my least favorite level in the game, because it has slippery ice floors, which I'm never a big fan of, and the timed hookshot puzzles, where you have to like hit a switch and then do something within a certain amount of time. And I felt like the times were like, they're obviously like timed correctly because you can get through by the skin of your teeth, or what feels like it. But I would fail those like several times before I could actually do it. Like well beyond the point where I was like, oh, okay, I see what I have to do now. Now I need 3 more attempts to actually execute it. And I just didn't like those a ton. Other than that, the other levels were all pretty fun.
Yeah, so earlier when I had mentioned that there were parts where it seemed like there was a flower, like a healing pot around every corner, it was actually that mountain level. There was a point where you're kind of on a catwalk, like zigzagging around, and you get platforms where you have to fight enemies, and it seemed like I'd get a healing pot, and I'd go like right and up and left again, and I'd be like just north of the healing pot, and there'd be another one right there. And yeah, it was just kind of like odd placement throughout that part of the level.
Yeah. The healing pots in general, just so odd to me, like throughout the game. Like just the decision to do it that way was odd. And then it would be there. You're right. There's some parts where like, it's like, oh, I just got done with a combat wave. I need a healing pot. Where's my healing pot? You know? And then sometimes where it's like, I haven't fought anything since the last healing pot.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah, after you get through those 3 spokes with the Beast, the Frog King, and the Urn Witch, you complete your task that you were doing. Maybe you should have said this earlier. This is the theme of the show, is just constantly like, oh, I should have mentioned this before the spoiler wall. But you made this old crow who needed you to get these 3 souls to open up this door that his assigned soul had escaped into. And so you go through the whole game and you think that like, okay, I'm going to open this door. The final boss will be in there. The crow is going to be my buddy. But something I wasn't expecting, it was a cool twist, that when you do open that door, the soul that you're trying to get, or he's trying to get, is gone forever. Like basically, you know, like once the soul enters that door, it's gone. You'll never find it. And he just loses his shit, and like he becomes a villain in the game.
Yeah.
And you have to take him down. And if I wasn't worried about spoiling, I would like share this on social media because it's such a visually striking fight. It's incredible.
It's just that really white canvas, right?
Yeah. And it shifts the perspective. You're way more overhead than the regular fights are.
And it leaves like this trail, right? Almost like an inky trail as it goes. It is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you're fighting, you get a lot of projectiles across the screen. And I don't know if it's my favorite fight because I think the final boss is really, really good too. But it's just an excellent boss fight. Like it's fun, and visually it's incredible. I have nothing but good things to say about that old crow fight.
Yeah, this might be my favorite because I didn't really care for the final boss fight, to be honest with you.
Let's get into it. What about the final boss did you not like?
Well, I just felt like it definitely needed a checkpoint. I said this to Brian months ago, I want to say that.
I wrote that in the notes too.
Yeah, I know. I saw it there, and I was like, I don't want you to think I'm going off your notes. Like, these are my genuine feelings, because it was like, how many times am I going to have to do this, like, dodge left, dodge right, duck behind the thing? Like, that whole first part, and then just to get to the fight again was like, oh, man, like, I know this, I've got the pattern memorized, like, I don't have to keep doing this. And it does it twice, I think, right? It does that twice.
You're going, for people listening, if you haven't played or if you forgot, you're going through a gauntlet of like you have to get to the other side of this gauntlet, and you're just avoiding stuff throughout the level, like projectiles and enemies and things shooting out and like disappearing ledges, and you have to hook shot around, and it's definitely multiple screens. It's at least 2 screens of it, and I totally agree. There should be a checkpoint. Because there's just nothing. There's nothing worse than like you get to a part and you die a few times, but you have to do that first part over again, and that's just it sucks in every game that does that.
Well, especially because it wasn't ever necessarily difficult. I feel like I got through it the first time. Right? Like, it's challenging. It's like, oh, you have to really read what's coming your way and move accordingly. But I got through it the first time. And then if it's not challenging the first time, you can imagine if you have to do it multiple times, you're like, come on, this is just like, why am I doing this again?
Yeah. It might be a little bit of nitpicking in a game that's so short, you know? But it's because, well, for me, I didn't beat it my first time. It took me like maybe at least 5 tries on each section of the gauntlet to basically memorize what's coming and where I have to go to get through it. So by like my 10th attempt at the whole gauntlet, and I have to go do the first part again, I was like, God damn it, just give me a checkpoint, you know? Like I've proven to you, game, I can do this, you know?
Right.
But I don't know. Brian, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I completely forgot that whole thing existed, but I don't think I had too much trouble with it. I think I had more trouble with the actual boss fight than the gauntlet, honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was annoying, but yeah, I don't think it was overly difficult or made me frustrated anytime.
Yeah, no, I will say I think the final boss is a good boss fight. I know I sound like I'm just bitching and moaning about it, but like, it is a good boss fight. It's just that made it to where it couldn't be my favorite one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you know, there was enough of a fault there that it couldn't possibly be the best to me.
Do you guys remember, do you get a checkpoint after you beat the gauntlets before you fight the final boss? Like if you die in the boss fight, do you get a checkpoint? Do you remember?
I do remember.
Sure?
Yeah, I do remember. I think maybe you get one before the very final phase of the fight, but I think there are 4 phases to it.
Right. So
if I'm not mistaken.
You get to the end of one gauntlet section, you fight the boss it's really short, you know, you have to hit him, you know, 20 times or something like that, and then he disappears. I mean like the final one where you're in the headquarters.
Right.
That's the part that I had the most trouble with.
I think there's
say.
a checkpoint just before that.
I think there is too. Yeah.
But you do a boss rush prior to that, right? There's like a boss rush too somewhere in there.
Ooh.
As a part of it.
I don't remember. I should have written that down.
I'm sure you go back to at least like the Yeti, right? Like, doesn't he roll around in the Yeti's room like the Yeti? Yeah. So there's there's enough there to be frustrating without a checkpoint somewhere within. There are like 3 phases before the final one, and it's like no checkpoint for those 3.
Yeah. I definitely wanted a checkpoint at some point in there. Then when you do make it to HQ and you fight like the final version of the boss, I thought that was really good. I really enjoyed that. It's basically every mechanic, every attack that any boss has done up until then all together. And this is a thing like with all the bosses, I feel like they all only have like 3 moves that they use. And this final boss has like 5 moves. So it's still not a whole lot to memorize, but you have to, again, you can't heal during any of this. So you have to basically be perfect in this fight. I still thought it was really fun, though, and visually striking, again, in this black and white environment with all these like glowing attacks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it would have been visually striking if like when he shoots the orbs at you, if it was just a big like lightsaber colored orb, right? Because it is that same pink hue that your lightsaber has, that almost reddish pink. But they did like reflections and lighting effects on the wall and floor, and I thought that was like, that really added to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I beat that final boss on maybe my 3rd try, something like that. There were a couple of attacks that like they hit me hard a couple of times, and then once you get the hang of the attacks and stuff like that, it's not so hard to dodge. But he has a lot of, I think he has multiple phases even in that last phase. It is a final boss, everything comes together.
Yeah, I think that's my pet peeve of games is if the final boss doesn't feel like the big climax to everything, then it kind of ends like a wet fart. But this one definitely had a good, strong final boss.
Unless there's a really good reason for it, because there's a couple of games where the final boss is kind of a pushover, but there's a good thematic reason for that happening.
Sure.
But this is a good like final test. Like everything you've learned throughout the game, you got to do it right here.
Right.
No, the game ends well. Yeah. So just a little bit of a lore dump here.
Yeah.
The Lord of Doors is like the some odd number in a line of Lord of Doors, right? He's like the 5th or 6th. And he made a deal with, there was always this deal with death where they would reap souls to extend, and in return would get an extended life. Death would give them an extended life, the person death in this game. Because they're reaping souls, so Death kind of gets like a break and a vacation out of it.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Death was like a really cool guy.
Yeah.
It's funny, like you're going after him and then he ends up being the nice guy and the crow freaks out. And you're like, what the heck's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, hold on. This is not what I expected at all. But the Lord of Doors was the one who couldn't let go. He had opened this door and trapped Death behind it, so that souls could no longer reach that realm, and they were the soul reapers, and basically he would never die.
And didn't he like make the crows do this? Like that was, he forced them.
Right. So they were reaping souls, but souls would get stranded, and the stranded souls would turn into monsters. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what you're fighting throughout the game, is how I took it. But it kind of didn't gel with that, like the stranded crows, because stranded crows are there and they're in crow form. Granted, they're spirits, but like, why weren't they monsters?
Yeah, it would have been kind of cool to fight the crows. I don't know if you had to do it 3 times in each dungeon, that would have gotten kind of old. So maybe I'm talking myself out of it already, but would have been okay. Would have been cool.
The one issue I have too is like the crow at the end, after you defeat the Lord of Doors, the little crow worked himself out of a job, dude.
Yeah.
Like Death is now the soul Reaper. only. Yeah.
So
And,
he's like, okay, what am I?
yeah,
So
like
go get a job at the gas station or something.
right. Like, what do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So anything else about Death's Door story or bosses or anything like that we haven't mentioned so far?
I'm eager to know if you guys would want a sequel to this game.
What would
Yeah,
they do?
I would play it because I trust. I think
Acid
the
Nerve.
developers know what they're doing. Acid Nerve, they know what they're doing. They obviously are very competent game makers. So if they make Death's Door 2, I would play it for sure. I would have my expectations in line this time, so I might actually enjoy it a little bit more too.
Sure.
What about you?
Yeah, I think I would play it. I think they have received a lot of criticism. Even everything we've just talked about is out there. I think other people had similar experiences. So, if they take that to heart, then I think it could make for a better game, or they could, stick in their direction and refine whatever they feel is their strong point. But I think there's room for growth and for this to be, even if it was like a longer game but had more density to it, I feel like that was one of the things that, you're collecting little upgrades every once in a while, but there's not that like Zelda rupee that it's like, all right, this is worth one thing, but like collect 100 and you can do something else. There's not a lot of little trinkets to like always get. It's always these kind of big things, like the big shrine. So I think they could go in that direction where they kind of get a little more granular with what they're doing, but make it more dense.
I would like to see another game come out of Acid Nerve. I think I would almost assuredly give it a try, but I don't know if I want a sequel to this game just because of how it ended. Where are you going to go from there? It would have to be a forced story, and then you start getting the feeling, was it based off of the success of this game? Because that's what you don't want. You don't want anybody to make a game because it's a sequel to a game that did well, right?
Yeah.
That's when you make prequels and 3 prequel
exactly.
movies.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'd play a prequel.
Yeah. I think I didn't play Titan Souls. Is that what the previous one is?
Yeah.
I didn't play that, but I've heard pretty strong criticism from people I trust about the way that they made like difficulty in that game and the combat and stuff like that. So if that's the case, then I think they maybe improved a little bit for Death's Door, and I've made my criticisms pretty clear about the combat and healing systems in Death's Door. And if they iterate on that and just put it in a different, game setting, new story, new world, new everything, I'll definitely play it. Death's Door 2, I would probably play because I like how the story, has a nice conclusion here, but I don't really like, if they were to make up a new story for Death's Door 2, I wouldn't really care. That wouldn't be off-putting for me. I would be more interested in what they do with the gameplay.
Yeah. I have the perfect idea.
Oh,
2
okay.
players.
All right, let's hear it.
2 players, 2 crows running around, co-op.
Oh, there you go.
That's what you do for a sequel.
And you make it
always
actually like a Souls-like, right? Take a shot. You make it actually like a Souls-like, where you lose
final shot.
things when you die, and you have to go back and like get them, and it'd be beautiful. Yeah, there you go.
I'm actually really glad they didn't do that in this game, because like if you're gonna do that, you have to let me heal during fights. If you're gonna like punish me for dying, you have to let me heal sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So something's got to give. So, all right. Well, what do you guys say we wrap this one up here?
Yeah,
sounds good.
Let's do it.
Cool. Well, once again, this has been a great conversation. I've had a ton of fun talking about Death's Door. So once again, thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Hey,
it's our pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, honestly, thank you so much for having us on. I feel like I have to keep talking. I don't know what's been recorded prior to this, but we're not at that 2-hour mark yet, Dave. And
Yeah.
I in some ways, I want to be the one to break that streak, but in other ways, it's like the end of an era.
Well, it's possible, but I do have music to cut into the episode that may put us over or close to that 2-hour mark. But by the time this episode comes out, there will have been a string of 3+ hour long episodes of the show. So I was kind of like, I could talk about Death's Door for a while, but like I do want to kind of rein this back in a little bit. There's by the time this comes out, people will have heard the Hitman 2 episode, which is almost 4 hours long, and I don't regret a minute of it, but it's a long ass episode. You know?
Yeah, you actually got me to download Hitman 2. I have yet to play it, but because of your Hitman 1 episode, I downloaded Hitman 2.
Hell yeah. Well, by the time this episode comes out, January 31st will be the release date for the Hitman 2 episode. So it's almost as long as the real game. Cool. Well, guys, once again, people listening, one more plug for the List Off podcast, which is just a fantastic show and easy listening. You know, lists are, I think human brains are engineered to love lists, and there's nobody that does it better than List Off. So check out that show.
Yeah, we're engineered to prey on the human brain. So
yes, exactly.
That's right. We have a team of scientists who drip feed just the right amount of dopamine to you.
Exactly. The algorithm says lists.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. So thank you everybody for listening, and stay tuned next time for the next game that comes out of the backlog. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.